In 1387, a pickpocket named William the Quick had his hands placed into a wooden contraption in London town square. The crowd watched as the executioner slowly turned a handle, and the screams of William filled the air as his fingers were systematically crushed one by one. But that is not even the worst part. What historians tried to bury is that this was not random cruelty. This was surgical precision. Medieval societies developed 3 specific torture methods designed exclusively for thieves' hands. And by the end of this video, you will discover why some professional criminals actually chose to have their hands destroyed rather than face the alternative. I am going to reveal the device that could identify a thief just by looking at their hands. Why master pickpockets lined up voluntarily for hand-crushing punishments. And the modern country where they are still cutting off thieves' hands today in 2024. But before we dive into these brutal methods that turned human hands into twisted warnings, you will need steady hands to smash that subscribe button because what you are about to learn will make you question everything you thought you knew about medieval justice. Trust me, this story gets so much darker than you think. Picture yourself in 14th century Europe. You are walking through a crowded marketplace when suddenly you feel a gentle brush against your belt. Your coin purse is gone. The thief has already melted into the crowd and your week's wages have vanished forever. This was not just petty crime. This was professional warfare. Master thieves operated in organized guilds with apprentices, specializations, and territories. They had their own codes, their own training methods, and most importantly, they had their hands the precision instruments that made them fortunes. Medieval authorities faced a terrifying reality. Traditional punishments were not working. Whipping a pickpocket. He would be back stealing within days. His hands perfectly functional, throwing him in prison. Expensive, and he would just network with other criminals, executing every thief. The bodies would pile too high and society needed workers. So they developed something far more sinister. Punishments that matched the crime with surgical precision. If your hands were your weapons, then your hands would become your prison. But here is what nobody tells you about medieval justice. It was not just about punishment. It was about creating living advertisements. Every mangled hand that reached for bread in the marketplace sent a message. This is what happens when you steal. The 3 methods I am about to show you were not just torture devices. They were psychological warfare, economic deterrence, and social engineering rolled into instruments of unthinkable precision. What is truly horrifying is not just the brutality. It is how methodically these systems were designed, tested, and perfected. Medieval engineers approached hand destruction with the same careful planning they used to build cathedrals. And it gets worse from here. The first method looks almost innocent, just wooden stocks, like something you would see at a Renaissance fair. But look closer at these 14th century London court records, and you will discover something chilling. Item 1: pillory for the hands with iron spikes positioned to pierce the palms when weight is applied to be used for pickpockets of the first offense. This was not your typical pillory. While regular stocks held heads and hands for public humiliation, these specialized versions were designed as precision instruments of destruction. The wooden planks contained hidden iron spikes positioned exactly where a person's palms would rest when locked in place. Here is how it worked. When they locked your hands in position, you could stand comfortably at first, but as hours passed, your legs would tire. As you sagged, your full body weight would drive your palms down onto those iron spikes, piercing straight through your hands. The genius of this torture was choice. Stand for 12 hours straight and maybe keep your hands intact or give in to exhaustion and permanently damage the tools of your trade. Either way, you would never pickpocket with the same dexterity again. But the psychological component was even more brutal. The crowd was not just watching, they were participating. Citizens would throw stones, rotten food, and worse. Some would deliberately bump into the pillory, causing the victim to lose balance and impale their hands. William the Quick, the pickpocket I mentioned earlier, lasted 8 hours before his legs gave out. Court records describe the sound his palms made as they hit the spikes like a butcher's cleaver striking bone. The scarring was permanent and distinctive. Anyone could identify a former pickpocket by the symmetrical puncture wounds on their palms. This marking system created a database of known criminals centuries before fingerprinting existed. But here is where it gets truly disturbing. The pilloried hands were just the entry-level punishment. Because 14th century authorities discovered that some thieves adapted, learning to steal with their damaged hands or switching to different crimes. Do not click away yet, because what they did to repeat offenders makes the pillory look like a gentle warning. The next punishment did not just damage hands, it branded them forever, creating walking advertisements that followed thieves for the rest of their lives. And trust me, the branding process was far worse than you are imagining. The smell hit you first, that distinctive stench of burning flesh mixed with heated metal. Then came the screams. In colonial America, repeat offenders faced something that made the pillory look merciful. The thief's brand. Not just any brand, but a system so precisely designed that you could read a criminal's entire history just by examining their palms. These Massachusetts court records detail the exact procedure. The letter T for thief to be burned into the flesh of the right palm with iron heated to cherry red for second offense. Letter R for rogue in the left palm for third offense. But here is what nobody tells you. This was not just about marking criminals. This was economic warfare. Imagine trying to buy bread when everyone can see the T burned into your palm. Imagine shaking hands in business deals, picking up tools for work, or even holding your own children with permanent proof of your crimes seared into your flesh. The branding process itself was a public spectacle designed to maximize psychological impact. The iron was heated until it glowed cherry red, hot enough to cauterize flesh instantly and prevent infection, because they wanted you to survive and carry this mark forever. Court documents from 1698 describe the technique. The criminal's hand shall be secured to a wooden block. The brand applied for exactly 3 seconds, pressed with sufficient force to penetrate the full thickness of the palm skin, ensuring permanent scarification that cannot be concealed or removed. 3 seconds. That is all it took to destroy someone's ability to function in society. But here is the truly diabolical part. Different colonies used different letters and positions. T for thief in Massachusetts. R for rogue in Virginia. B for burglar in Pennsylvania. This created an interstate criminal identification system centuries before modern law enforcement databases. The psychological impact went beyond the physical pain. Branded thieves developed elaborate methods to hide their marks, wearing gloves in summer, keeping hands in pockets, learning to shake hands with their backs turned. Some even tried self-mutilation, cutting deeper wounds to obscure the brand letters. Yet, even branded thieves found ways to continue stealing, which led medieval authorities to develop the most brutal solution of all. Because if pillorying did not work, and branding did not work, then maybe complete destruction of the hands would finally solve the problem. What comes next is not just torture. It is surgical amputation disguised as justice. The device I am about to show you was so effective that even historians struggle to discuss it. In 1532, a German executioner named Franz Schmidt wrote in his diary about a device he called the hand engine, a spring-loaded contraption that could systematically break every bone in a human hand while keeping the victim conscious throughout the entire process. Schmidt's notes are disturbingly clinical. The device consists of 2 iron plates connected by 4 adjustable screws. When properly calibrated, it crushes each finger bone in sequence, beginning with the smallest joints and proceeding to the wrist. Total procedure time, approximately 47 minutes. 47 minutes. This was not random torture. This was precision engineering designed to maximize both pain and permanent disability. The device included measurement markings to ensure consistent pressure and a ratcheting mechanism that prevented the victim from pulling their hands free once the crushing began. But here is what makes your blood run cold. Schmidt's diary reveals that he tested and refined this device over months using cadavers to perfect the pressure settings. He calculated exactly how much force would break bones without causing immediate death from shock. The psychological component was equally brutal. Victims could watch their own hands being systematically destroyed bone by bone while remaining fully conscious. The device was positioned so they could see every crack, every splinter, every moment of their livelihood being methodically eliminated. Court records from Nuremberg described the public spectacle. The criminal Wilhelm Bauer, convicted of repeated theft, was subjected to the hand engine before a crowd of 400 citizens. His screams could be heard 3 streets away, serving as proper warning to other would-be thieves. The aftermath was even more horrifying than the process. Survivors were left with hands that looked like twisted claws, bones healed at wrong angles, fingers that could never again grip objects with precision. They became living warnings, begging in marketplaces with their mangled appendages visible to all. Some victims died from shock or infection, but most survived to face a worse fate, living with the knowledge that they had chosen this mutilation themselves. Wait, what chosen it? But here is what nobody tells you. And this is where this story takes its most shocking turn. Professional thieves did not just endure this punishment. Many of them actually volunteered for it. They lined up, begged for it, chose deliberate hand destruction over the alternative because what they faced instead of the hand crusher was so much worse that living without hands seemed like mercy. The alternative to hand destruction was death. But not just any death, public execution by hanging, often preceded by hours of additional tortures that made hand crushing look gentle. Here is the horrifying calculation that professional thieves had to make. Choose definite hand mutilation and live as a disabled beggar, or face a 50% chance of surviving the gallows, with the other 50% being a slow, agonizing death by strangulation. Court records from 15th century Germany revealed the brutal mathematics. Hangings had a 47% survival rate due to rope failures, executioner incompetence, or last-minute interventions. But survival meant facing even worse punishments, while death meant, well, death. Master thief Heinrich Goldfinger Zimmermann 1489 confession preserved in Munich archives explains the twisted logic. I choose the hand engine over the rope because I have seen men dance on air for 20 minutes before dying. I have seen the rope break and leave men half strangled only to be hanged again. Better to live without hands than die with them. This created an underground economy that historians tried to bury. Professional thieves began forming networks of voluntary mutilates, disabled former criminals who became informants, guards, and intelligence gatherers for the very authorities who had destroyed their hands. Think about the psychology. If you could no longer steal, but you understood how thieves operated, you became incredibly valuable to law enforcement. These hand-crushed former criminals became medieval Europe's first organized crime informants. Schmidt diary reveals the scope. In this year alone, I have processed 23 thieves through the hand engine. Of these, 19 survived and now serve as informants for the City Watch. They identify new thieves, reveal criminal networks, and demonstrate to the public what befalls those who steal. The system was so effective that it eventually destroyed itself. By 1550, so many professional thieves had chosen mutilation over execution that organized crime networks collapsed. There simply were not enough functional hands left to maintain the sophisticated theft operations that had plagued medieval cities. But the ultimate irony, this surgical destruction of criminal hands led to the rise of different crimes, fraud, blackmail, and confidence schemes that did not require manual dexterity. The authorities had solved the pickpocket problem by creating an entirely new category of criminal. The hand-crushing devices disappeared by 1600, not because society became more humane, but because they had worked too well. They had eliminated the very criminals they were designed to punish, forcing crime to evolve beyond the reach of physical mutilation. Medieval justice achieved its goal through the most brutal means imaginable, and in doing so accidentally taught criminals that the human mind could be far more dangerous than the human hand. I know this has been dark, but if you are still watching, you are clearly as fascinated by history brutal truths as I am. Make sure you are subscribed because next week I am revealing the medieval punishment that made criminals beg for the hand crusher. These hand-specific punishments shaped criminal culture for over 300 years, creating a brutal equilibrium between crime and punishment that modern justice systems still struggle to understand. But here is what should terrify you. We never really stopped. In 2024, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and several other nations still practice judicial hand amputation for theft. Just last month, a 23-year-old man in Riyadh had his right hand surgically removed for stealing a mobile phone worth $200. The methods have become more clinical, more humane. Modern amputations use anesthesia and sterile surgical techniques, but the psychological principle remains identical. Destroy the tool, destroy the crime. Medieval Europe brutal experiment proved that targeting specific body parts based on specific crimes could effectively reshape criminal behavior. The question is not whether these punishments worked. Historical evidence proves they did. The question is whether a civilization should define justice as the systematic destruction of human bodies even when those bodies belong to criminals. So here is what I want you to think about. If you were facing life in prison or losing your hands, which would you choose, and more importantly, what does your answer reveal about the nature of justice itself? Let me know in the comments. And do not forget to watch my next video about the medieval punishment that made the hand crusher look merciful.